assay, and finally, I'll be talking about cell cycle analysis using multi-cycle software. So what is cell cycle? The cell cycle or a cell division cycle is the series of events that takes place in living cells leading to its division and duplication of its DNA to produce two daughter cells. Cell cycle is divided into four main stages: resting, intraphase, mitosis, and cytokinesis. So here, this is the four stages of cell cycle, and here is the nice picture showing all the stages. And first, we'll start with a resting phase. The resting phase or resting stage where cells take an interval in the cell cycle between cell division, and it will just go out of the cell cycle and it will rest, and it could be because of lack of growth factors and nutrients or proper signals. Some of the cells takes a shorter time, some of the cells might take a longer time to get back to the growing cycle. It depends on the cells. And when it gets all the nutrients, acquire all the nutrients and growth factors and the stimulation, it will reversible and it comes back to the growth stage. And then when it comes back, the first thing is intraphase. The intraphase is subdivided into G1, S, and G2 phase. And here, the cell grows into its mature size, and DNA replication happens and preparation for division. So basically, the cell grows and replicates the DNA, and cell gets ready for the division. In mitosis stage, distribution of one copy of DNA into each of its daughter cells. And then here, there are subdivided into 5 stages. And then finally, the cytokinesis stage, where physical separation of cell takes place and 2 daughter cells are formed. When 2 daughter cells are formed, and each daughter cell will again start the cell cycle while dividing, or it could rest to accumulate the growth factors and nutrients. So intraphase of cell cycle, I just want to talk a little bit more on this one, because these are the 3 sub-stage of the intraphase where we study these stages in the flow cytometry. And here these 3 stages are commonly called as G1, S, and G2 phase. In G1 phase, it is also called as first gap or a growth phase. And here, cell increases in size, cell synthesize proteins, enzymes, organelles, and other substances required for the DNA synthesis. And synthesis phase, it is, as the name suggests, synthesis in its S phase. And here, the DNA replicates, and amount of DNA doubles here. And the last phase here, the second gap or a growth phase, G2 phase, the cell grows further and organelles produced for cell division. And once that stage is done, the mitosis and cytokinesis takes place, and this I've already gone through. I'm going to skip this slide. So here, the cell cycle analysis using flow cytometry. So as you all know, flow cytometry is a powerful tool to analyze cell cycle, that's analysis of DNA, and procedures are well established and studied, and protocols are accurately studied using flow cytometry. And here, when I say analysis in flow cytometry, cell cycle analysis is nothing but analysis of DNA. By binding the DNA binding dye, by adding the DNA binding dye. There are many DNA binding dyes in the market, but some of the examples are PI, 7AAD, TOPRO3, DAPI, HERS3334, and DRACY. Again, there are many DNA binding dyes. Here, this is just some of the examples. And the most popular DNA binding dye are propydium iodide, PI, and propydium iodide and 7AAD and DAPI and topros are used for the fixed cells, and HERS3334 and DRAC5 are used for the live cell cycle analysis. When I say PI, if you are already worked on flow cytometry, you know that PI is used for the viability to identify the and to differentiate the live and dead cells. But in this case, especially PI is used in the fixed cells, so cells are already fixed. So you use PI to study the DNA content and not for the viability. It's not work as a viability in the cell cycle analysis. And this dye is stoichiometric in nature. That means this DNA binding dye is bind in proportion to the amount of DNA present in the cell. So this is the binding dye is it has to saturate the DNA present in the sample. It is as proportional to the amount of DNA present. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So here, just to see the profile, DNA profile when you run DNA analysis or cell cycle analysis in flow cytometry, this is how the profile looks. And I think you all have seen this pattern. This is G1 peak, and then S phase, and then G2 peak. So this is the x-axis, the DNA content. If this is DNA parameter, that is, if it is a propydium iodide stain, so this is the propydium iodide area, and you can see that this first peak you see here is G1, and the second peak you see here is the G2, and the center in between that is the S phase. So G2 has 2 times more bright, 2 times more DNA than the G1, so it is brighter than the G1. The G1 peak is dimmer because it has lower DNA content than the G2. And then S phase gradually increases because it's a synthesis phase, and gradually the DNA increases in this phase. DNA replicates, and so you see that it is gradually increasing. So cell preparation to run on flow cytometry. I'm not going to go step-by-step explanation of cell preparation. Here I'm just going to give a few important points to remember. So first, when you take when you want to do the cell cycle analysis, you want to think if you want to use fixed cells or live cells. If you are using fixed cells, choose the DNA binding dye according to that, and live cell you can use House 33342 and DRAC5 are most popular, but there are many dyes in the market. You can choose any. And then it is very important to take a good healthy cells to start the assay that is confluent of the cell. If you should not take the confluent cells which is more than 80% confluent. When it is more confluent, there will be more dead cells and debris. So to avoid that, you take healthy cells to start the analysis. You don't want to introduce dead cells or debris in the beginning of the analysis. And sample concentration. So sample concentration, you start and take a sample prepping from 500,000 to 2 million cells. This is just to start the beginning concentration. By the time you prepare the sample, you might lose a lot of cells while washing or spinning. So you take enough cells so that even if you lose cells, the final concentration when you run on the flow cytometry should be at least a few 100,000. So you can record, finally you will be recording only 10,000 or 20,000 healthy cells to see a nice pattern of DNA profile. But it is better to start with 500,000 or 2 million if you have more cells. And also, it is important to remember that you take the cells, same number of cells on each sample. So when you bring a sample, it should not be that one cell is good, has a good number of cells, and the other samples having less, so for comparison it will be difficult. And then again, washing and spinning. So if you wash many more than few times, each time you would losing cells. So you need to take care of that. And also spinning on a lower speed or on a lower time might heal the less number of cells. And in some DNA binding dye, you need to add RNAs to the prep. Especially PI, you have to add RNAs because PI binds the double-stranded RNAs. To eliminate that, to get the accurate results of DNA study, you need to add RNAs to the prep, so you get rid of all the RNAs. And incubation time, and again, incubation time and the temperature of the sample you prep, on which you prep, is also important while preparing the sample. So now, once you prep the sample and ready to run, most of the of you must be using Flowcore, and you get the sample, and some of the staff in the Flowcore would run the sample for you. But if you want to run the sample yourself, or just to understand acquisition, I have some points here. So first thing is you need to have a single cell suspension. So if the sample is clumpy, it would clog the instrument. So when you, just before running, you can mix the sample by vertexing, or gently vertexing, or tapping the sample tube, or by mixing it with a pipette. And running the sample in low sample flow rate, the high pressure leads to the high CV. The CV of the peak would be higher or larger. So you have to run the cell cycle analysis on a lower flow rate. And DNA fluorescent intensity is measured using linear scale. This one, whenever you run a flow cytometry, where you will use the log scale for the fluorescent intensity to see the fluorescent intensity. In this case, in DNA fluorescent intensity measurement, you have to use linear scale, not log scale. So this is because the DNA found in these phases are relatively small differences in signal intensity. So the intensity is not going to increase exponentially. So that it's very small differences between G1 peak or G2 peaks. To see the difference, you have to run the DNA analysis in flow cytometry using linear scale. And then perform a doublet discrimination, height versus area. So here, let's start with this plot, and then I'll go one by one. So when you start running the sample, you see the cells scatter, that is FSC versus SSC, and here you can eliminate the debris and just gate the cells, and then move on to the next gate. And here you have x-axis height, the parameter height. In this case, it is DAPI. So the height, and then versus area, and then you see this diagonal single cell population here, and then there will be the high area, which is higher the area, you can eliminate that doublet cells, and then gate on only single cells. And then the next gate, this gate, you can keep this gate open. Even if you don't gate on this one during the acquisition, if necessary, you can gate during analysis. So this is time gate. Time gate where you can see whether the sample is running smoothly, if there is any interruption in the sample. In this case, it is not, there is no interruption, the sample has run smoothly. But in the next slides, I'll be showing some examples of disturbed sample run. So during acquisition, you have to adjust the voltages of the parameter, and just to see the profile of the DNA profile, then you have to see G1 peak and G2 peak, and there should be some space here for the sub G0 G1 population. and then kind of you can just give one quarter of the space here, and then keep the G0, G1 and G2 peak nicely visible, so you can adjust the voltages, and then not to keep too low or too high to lose any population. And here, the last thing is to remember to bring a good control. And here you bring a healthy. When I say healthy, it is less than 80% confluent cells and untreated cells. If you're treating with some drugs, you can bring an untreated cells as a control, as a reference to start the acquisition. You can run the control first and then run your samples. So here are some of the example slides I'll be showing. The first thing is low number of cells acquired. And on the left side, you can see that here only 234 cells are run. And these samples are run in our facility, and I have done this analysis here just to see that it is going to be difficult for us to get the doublets because the population is not visually clear. And the pattern also looks not very good. And when you put this kind of cells in the analysis, automatic curve fitting software, even it will not recognize the peak properly. And this kind of data would be not accurate or will be not useful. And on the right side, you see this is this sample is about 20,000 cells are run, and here you see nice separation between single cells and doublets, and you can eliminate that, and then you see a nice pattern of G1 and G2 peaks. And when you put this in the software for the analysis, it will recognize the peaks and give the statistics, and this is how your data should look. And it is important for you to bring a good number of cells when you have running the cell cycle analysis. So here, I just wanted to talk about a little bit basics on doublet discrimination because it is kind of critical for cell cycle analysis. So here, this is just the basic. When you have a laser and this particle, any particle or a cell pass through the laser, there is a pulse formation. The voltage pulse is generated, and the pulse characteristics are area, height, and width. So when there is a pulse, there will be a width of the pulse and height of the pulse, and then you can calculate the area. And here the area is overall amount of fluorescence associated with an event, and height is the peak signal, and width is a signal signal duration, the duration of this particle passing through the laser. And the plotting width versus area, or plotting area versus height, would give you the same thing I've done here. So this is a height PI versus area PI. And here you see there is this single cells, and then there is doublets, which is having a higher area, is kind of parallel to this one. And this is the doublets, and these are the single cells. When we have to just see this cell cycle, here to N cell, there is one single cell, and there is two single cells of G0 or G1 phase cells are attached. And then you see this is the single cell signal, how it should look. And here, because it is two cells attached, there is area is bigger. When you calculate the area, height versus height times width, then the area is bigger than the single cell. That's why this the sample is plotted on higher the area here. So, and also when you have a bigger cells with G2M, this area is bigger, but this its area is bigger than the G1, but there is no duplicate of the cells there. So here there is this duplicate of the cells of G2M, or the 4 cell attaching of 2N cells. So you see the same pattern. You see this is the single cell pattern, and here you see the same pattern as this one, but these are 2 cells or 3 cells or 4, or in this place you see this must be a bigger clump. So that's how you eliminate this and just take only single cell by gating height versus area of the parameter. And this is a good example or important of the doublet discrimination. So here you see the difference, an example. So here I've taken a data and then I've just gated on cells. And then without gating the doublets, I'm directly taking the cells to see the histogram. And here you see, you do see G1 peak, G2 peak, but there is a tail here, it's extending. And when you put this kind of data in the analysis, then the software might confuse and think that there is 2 cycles here like aneuploidy, and it would be, the statistic would be not correct, and this is the wrong representation of the data. So after self-gating, instead of looking at this 2, if you take the next gate, here, this is what I was talking. So I wanted to show this plot here. This is the time gating, time versus forward scatter here, or you can add any, even the PI or any parameter you can see on the y-axis. So when you see this, you see first few seconds, the sample is not run smooth. There is some kind of disturbance. It could be cells are clumpy, it is blocking the zipper, or it could be the pressure issue or some kind of issue first few seconds, and then later on if the sample is run pretty smooth. So instead of just taking everything, you could just gate on wherever it is smoothly run. You can just gate on that and call it as a time gate, and then move to the next gate. And here I'm eliminating the doublets by putting height versus area, and then taking only single cell to the next plot, that is this histogram plot. And you see the peak is looking pretty good. There is no tail here. And when you put this kind of data in the analysis software, it would recognize the peaks proper and then give the accurate results, DNA analysis. And I've been showing these peaks, and I've been talking about G1 peak, G2 peak, and the S phase. But there is, you must be observing there is another peak on the left side of the G1, which is like a shoulder here. This is called sub G0 G1. Just for visual representation, I made this slide where you see that it's not a healthy cells. It must be debris, dead, or apoptotic cells. It could have entered when you start the assay, or it could have, dead or debris cells would have formed while treatment or during the process. So this is what this is, and then healthy cells would show the proper G1, S, and G2 peak. And here, when you're running the samples and you see that there is a huge peak here before G1 peak, which is sub G0 G1 peak, which is about 50% here. When you are not, if you're not expecting this much of depth or debris in your sample, there are some of the points you need to take care, and I'm going to talk about that here. So when you have this and you don't expect that to be that huge, the 50% of dead cells, then it could be the cells were not confluent in culture. So that if the cells are too confluent, if the cells are too confluent, maybe that's why you see this big peak on the sub G0 G1 rate. And also the amount of dye is not sufficient to saturate the double-stranded DNA in the sample. That means I've already explained that this DNA binding dye is stoichiometric in nature. That means it is proportional to the DNA. If you don't add enough the dye, it would not saturate the DNA in the sample, and it would be a negative. It could some of the DNA which is not stained would look like negative. So on PI area, it would look negative for that. Sometimes if you had enough dye, this might get lower and you might see a good peak. You can test that if you see a lot of a big peak here. And then cells are not properly permeabilized. If the cells are not properly permeabilized, the DNA would not enter in the cell and stain the DNA. If it is negatively stained, if it is not stained, then cells would look like this. This peak would be bigger, larger, and then you will have bigger cells. So you have to keep in mind that you have to permeabilize properly. And also when you're treating the drug, then it could be the drug dosage is high or the long time point. So you need to standardize the dosages and the time point. If it is too high, then a lot of cells must be dying because of the drug or the time exposure to that drug. So when you have a bigger, larger peak like this for the sub-G0G1, then when you put this in the analysis software, and it would get, again, confuse this to a G1 peak, and then it would form 2-cycle peak, which you are not expecting in that time. And then another example is adding RNAs. So this depends on the dye you're using. If you're using prapidium iodide to stain the cell cycle, yes, you need to use the RNAs. It is important because the prapidium iodide will bind to the double-stranded RNA. So here is the example. This is the prapidium iodide no RNA, and this is with RNA, and here RNAs. And then here you see the CVs are wide, and the profile is not looking that great. And here you see adding RNAs would clearly separate the peaks, and also the CV is lower. But if you're using DAPI or host dye, then no need to add RNAs because both dyes are fairly specific to the DNA. And even if there is some RNAs, it does not interfere in the analysis. So now the cell cycle on fixed cells. So here I've already been talking about prapidium iodide and the dyes. So you could use any of these dyes and also many more in the market. So the point I will be explaining more is this permeabilization and fixing. The cell permeabilization in this cell cycle assay, you need to use 70% ethanol. If you use formaldehyde, then it would cross-link with chromatin constitutes, and also intercalating the fluorescence, fluorochrome, and this decreases the accuracy of the DNA content measurement. So you need to use 70% ethanol for fixing and permeabilizing the cells for this assay. After preparation of the fixed cells, you can't store the sample in a couple of days or even weeks. It is stable, so you can keep it and run later, even over the weekend. If you prep the sample and keep it in a proper temperature, refrigerator or 4 degrees, it will stay stable to run the sample after a week or even few days. And the histogram here, you see that this is a classical DNA profile, and this is how it should look. I've already spoken about that. But these two plots here, so when you use live cells, any live cells, when you do the analysis on flow cytometry, you see scatter plot, and this is how it would look. But when you fix the sample, especially for fixed sample cell cycle analysis, when you run the sample on a forward scatter or side scatter, the sample may look like this. So you need to increase the voltage for the fixed sample because the cells would have, after fixing, the cells would have shrunk. So you have to increase the forward scatter and side scatter voltage to see the nice scatter plot. And here, this is cell cycle using live cells. So there is many dyes available. Again, this is only few examples to stain the live cells. And why do we have to stain live cells? Because there is ability to combine the assay if you want to do the analysis of cell cycle and also stain some your interest markers or to test some markers, you could combine the assays here, and also ability to sort. If you want to see the pattern of cell cycle and also sort the cell for further culture and to do some other assays, you can sort the cells. So you can get the complete cell cycle pattern, that is G1, S1, G2 complete population, and sort that, or you could individually get the G1 or S or G2 peaks and sort the peaks separately to do further analysis. And ability to identify stem cell site population. So this is, again, I've told this combined assay, when you want to see the cell cycle pattern, and also do another assay, combine the assay for seeing the cells, identify the stem cell site population. This is a popular assay. They combine the cell cycle and this one by adding Hurst 33342. You could do the analysis by seeing the stem cell site population. For prepping the cell for the live cell population, the cell, it is important to follow the instruction or the protocol here for the temperature is very critical to, so which temperature you stain, whether it is on ice or room temperature or 37 incubator. It is very critical, so you have to follow that, and also the timing, how long you stain. Because I have seen that some of the plots may not look this clean if you don't prep the sample that well. So it is when you are using live cell for the cell cycle, you have to prep the sample carefully, because if you want to again sort it, it has to be in a healthy condition. So prepping the sample in live cell is very critical. And now I've been talking about only single cells and single cell patterns. So here the cell cycle is in aneuploidy. When the cells have an abnormal number of chromosomes in cells, instead of say 46 pairs of chromosomes, if there is 45 or 47. If the chromosomes do not separate properly between two cells during any mitosis, this happens if it is not separated properly. It can form a tetraploidy or octoploidy, and in this case you see two cycles. So here, if you are expecting it, usually when you study these tumor cells or cancer cells, this is common. If you are treating with some kind of drugs, can also affect the cells, and you could see the aneuploidy pattern. If you are expecting this kind of aneuploidy population, yes, it is normal. You could get the single cells and see this kind. It does show the two cell cycle pattern. And even the multi-cycle software would recognize it as two cycles. So you see this is diploid. First one is, the red one is a diploid, and then the aneuploid on the second one. So the first one is G1 peak, and then the G2 peak is merged with the G1 peak of the second cycle. And if you're expecting it to be an aneuploidy experiment and the treatment to be to make the cells this, yes, it is normal, and you can see the two peaks and two cycles, and then you could even the analysis will give you a two cycle peaks and then give the statistics like this. If I have some points here, if you are not expecting it to be an aneuploidy, what would be the causes? But before that, I want to talk about these two plots, just to show you the difference between doublets, how the doublet discrimination works. And because you do see there is a lot of cells on top of this one, because initially a single cell, we used to take only this one, but here you see that there is diagonally, there is another population continuation of this one. So you could take that in a single cell. It is not, so you see the difference. This is diagonally, we are not taking any cells on this side here. So this is doublet discrimination. And here, this is the aneuploidy plot, how it would look on PI height and PI area, the same. And if you're not expecting it to be aneuploidy, what could be the issues? So some of the points are doublet cells may be included in the gates, yes. And also the cell line passage many times may spontaneously become tetraploidy. So if you're passaging the same cell many times, then it could cause spontaneous become a tetraploid. And that case, if you're not expecting it to be an aneuploidy, then you could thaw a new vial of cells and check the cell cycle of that to see the pattern, if it is a single cycle or 2 cycles. And more than one type of cells, if you have any contamination, if you're handling 2 different cell lines, if it is contaminated, and if the sample which you're using has contamination, then each cell line would give a different cell cycle. So that's that is why you're seeing 2 cycles. So these are just to see that if you're not expecting it to be an aneuploidy. If you are working on a drug, then if you think that it could be an aneuploidy, then you can see the 2 cycle peak and do the analysis. So far we just talked about cell cycle, and I'm going to talk a little bit about BRDU assay. Here, this assay is also a DNA analysis assay, and it is very popular to run in the flow cytometry. And BRDU is a synthetic nucleoside that is substituting for thymidine during DNA replication, inserted during the S phase of the cell cycle, and added during the cell culture in the media. So BRDU can be added during cell culture in the media, and also in vivo, BRDU is added to the mouse water, or also you could BRDU is IP injected into the mouse. Depending upon whether you're doing mouse model or a cell model, cell line, then you can put it in the culture media. And when you add the BRDU in the media, it will incorporate it into the actively dividing cells, that DNA synthesis in the S phase. And then you can add anti-BRDU conjugated with a fluorescent dye to recognize it, and you can study this in the flow cytometry. So this is how the plot would look. So here you see the cell. This is the control, which has no BRDU. So this is a combination assay. This is PI for the cell cycle, and also BRDU to see the BRDU whether it is incorporated in the S phase for the synthesis analysis. So here you see it is the control, so there is no BRDU, but you can see just the cell cycle pattern. On the right side, you see here the BRDU is added, and then it is incorporated in the S phase. And when you stain with BRDU 50 conjugated antibody, then you can see this is separating out from the G1 and G2 phase. And this is the cell cycle pattern. And this is just the data. I did the analysis. Some of these sample run in our facility, but here I found a very nice plot showing G1 and G2, and then BRDU here. Just to show you some nice good plot, I just chose this one. So if you prep the sample, if the treatment and the sample preparation is done properly, the sample should look like this. This is the propidium iodide and BRDU combination assay. There are some drawbacks of BRDU. That is, it needs so the antibody conjugated with the FITC, it would not penetrate the double-stranded DNA. You have to denature the DNA, and this can disrupt the DNA morphology and can destroy recognition of antigens, and impairing the subsequent co-staining procedure. And also this will consume sample preparation time. So I think I have read that it would take about 3 hours at least to prep the PRDU assay preparation. So because of this all points of the drawback, so there is another assay called EDU assay. It is also called as ClickIt EDU. In this assay, the EDU is a ethyl group and covalently cross-linked with the fluorescent azide. So when you introduce the EDU and to the actively growing cells, and it is incorporated into the DNA just like the BRDO. And then instead of antibody, you had the fluorescent azide, which is a smaller molecule which can penetrate into the DNA, double-strand DNA, to attach the EDU, to bind the EDU. And you don't need the step of denaturation of the DNA. So in here, the which and it's again the same thing. It is small and it can penetrate the DNA. And the ClickIt chemistry does not add up the detection of antibody. It is with the fluorescent azide, and simplified protocol due to lack of antibody and denaturation step. So this is I think this would take about an hour and a half of processing time to prep the EDU. Then it is about a few hours saving from BRDU to this assay. So this is the analysis. Again, I did not, you can do the combination assay with EDU also, but I did not get the data to analyze this for the analysis. So I just had EDU assay only. So here is the control and this is the positive. And you see the positive EDU incorporated in the sample is identified, and this is the overlap. But there is the combination assay. You can work with the combination assay. If the EDU is in the FITC, then you could add DAPI as a cell cycle analysis, and then you can see even the 10-second pattern and also EDU separation. So here I have a short animation of the EDU and BRDU assay, just for you to see the to see the visualize the assay. So this is BRDU incorporating into the DNA, and the antibody is not penetrating into the double-strand DNA. So you add the denaturation step, then it is accessible to the antibody to attach. But EDU, same way, it will incorporate it into the DNA, actively growing synthesis phase. And here the molecule, the fluoride molecule azide is fluorescent azide is small, that it can enter into the DNA and stay the for the analysis. And here finally I'll be talking about proliferation assay. So there are many proliferation assays. I'm not going to be talking about every proliferation assay, but most popular is the CFSE labeling proliferation assay, which is done on flow cytometry. So fluorescent dye proliferation, this is also called as fluorescent dye proliferation assay, and popular choice for the measuring the number of divisions undergoing by a cellular population. And upon division, the fluorescent intensity of each daughter cell is half. So this measures the metabolic activity. So here, when you take cells and stain with a CFSE, CFSE labeling the dye to the cells, and this will stain, and this is considered the generation 1, the first generation. When this divides into daughter cells, this is the second generation, or it could, then again it could be third, fourth, or fifth, how many generations you would, how many days you would grow. And each generation would have half of the intensity of the CFSE from the first generation to the second generation and the third. The intensity of the CFSE will go lower. So you see this plot here. Here, this is day 0. D0 is day 0. That is the day the CFSE is stained and put in the culture. And this sample, this cell are grown for 8 days. So each day, you see, each generation is formed. Each generation, the intensity of the CFSE is lower. So this is the, if you're adding some kind of drug to see or stimulating with some markers, you can see that whether it is helping it to be, growth, whether it is, growing into different generations, or it is not growing. So this is just the proliferation for the metabolic activity. And here is the example which is run in our facility. This data is given by Tianwei Yang, who is a senior research scientist in our department. So here she's taken the PBMC, healthy patients PBMC, and stimulated with CD3 and CD28. And this is the day 1 undivided cell. The day one she stained and she start the experiment. And then she grown for 5 days. So each day you see there is a peak which has lower the intensity of CFSE. So in this one, to analyze this data, I have again used the automatic proliferation assay model. And I have not gate myself. This is not a manual gate. This is the software used, and there is this software available in any analysis software. And here again, you get all the statistics, and you get each generation, the peak percentage, and the number of cells, and the median of that peak, and all the information or statistics you get from the software. And here I have this unstained control, and this is the unstained control, and this is the CFSE. This is not a curve, but just I'm overlaying just to show you the unstained control and the sample. So finally, now I'm going to be talking about a little bit about analysis, cell cycle analysis. I have been telling a multi-cycle, the automatic curve fit and everything. So this, I just want to talk about a little bit on that. So I'm showing this plot, which is done using FlowJo software, because this is the first plot, the slide I'm showing, because there is, I have used FCS Express to do the analysis, FCS Express software to do the analysis. So I just wanted to mention that you can use even FlowJo software to do the analysis. And this is the curve fit, and this is how it fits the G1, G2, and S phase, and the statistics are also available. But I will be using, because I have used FCS Express software to do the analysis, I'll be talking with the example of that one. So this is cell cycle analysis. When you start the analysis after acquisition, you start the analysis here, and this is the DNA percentage is analyzed here. The manual gate settings. So here, when you do the basic gates like cell gate, time, and single cell, and then you take the pattern and you see the pattern, you, instead of you manually gating the peaks by using the interval gates, it is better to use the curve fit software. So there is curve fit software even in all of the analysis softwares, like even FlowJo and FCS Express, but I've used multi-cycle here. And why it is because it would use the, it would eliminate the debris. This assay would, this analysis, the curve fit would eliminate the debris and dead cells, exclude that to give an accurate result on the interface DNA analysis. It would just give the interface DNA analysis by excluding all the debris and dead cells. And also, once it is all the curve fit is, if it is not curve fitting is not good, or if you think you could fix it, again, this is just as I'm mentioning that if it is necessary, the automatically generated gates can be manually corrected. But we are doing the curve fit. We are using this software not to make manual gating or manual adjustment. I'm just telling there is an option, but you just use this the curves fitting by itself, then tweaking in the automatic curve fitting, manually adjusting. And here are the statistics for this one. This is all generated while analysis in the multi-cycle. And just to show you, to expand this, just to show you how the statistics would look, this is the basic statistics. So it would give you deployed the percentage of G1, G2, yes phase, and all of this curve fitting. And also it will give a small interpretation saying that no abnormal DNA content is observed, and there is yes phase confident is good. And just to give a small note that it would give you some interpretation, and also experiment statistics. And there is on the left side here, there is this, in this multi-cycle software, there is 6 modules. I'll be showing that a little later. 6 modules, and each module has its own algorithms or a formula set, and it will depending upon your data, the curve fitting, so you could choose whichever module you want. So just to see which module is better, you see when you see this data with statistics out, you can see that this is chi-square values. And when there's you could see that lower the chi-square value, better the curve fit. So you in this data, compared to the 6th module, there is this model number 2 has the lowest chi-square value. So you could choose that model. I have chosen model number 2 in this analysis. So why do we have to use multi-cycle? Just to see that theoretically the DNA analysis plot should look like this. So G1 peak signal should be on the same channel, and it should look like very clean, just a peak like this, and then there is a gradually increasing of S phase, and then there is this 2 times more DNA from the G1. This is the G2 peak. It should look like this theoretically, but practically it is not. It is not going to be. You're not going to see that. So I have one plot here, which is really nice, very nice looking plot here. But most of the time we see this kind of plots. That could be because of a sample preparation or an instrument setting, the instrument QC and adjustment, and because it's giving the wider CVs, you don't want to manually gate and introduce more errors in the analysis. So better you can use curve fitting software's module, and better than the manual gating, and so that you have accurate results by comparing from one data to another data, or a control to the samples. It would be very accurate to use the curve fitting software than drawing manual gates. So here is the screenshot of the software, the FCS Express software. So this is what I was talking, the basic gating, and then you can generate the just a one click, just generate this, going to this is just a screenshot. So you can go to insert plot and insert the multi-cycle plot here to get this plot, and then you can click on a multi-cycle tab and click on each model to see that curve fitting. This curve fitting would change for each when you click on each model. and the generating the statistics and this interpretation is just one click by clicking on the right on the plot, and you can generate all this pretty quick. Here is the model I was talking about. So here I have taken, because I just wanted to show how the model would work. So each model this is number 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. So here, if you carefully observe, you see that the curve fitting of each model is slightly different than other. See this one, and when you see all of this, so each one is different than the other. But the same data, it's exactly same data, just looking at different models. And then if you're confused to see which, you could choose whichever looks nice, like visually. But if you want to go back and check the chi-square value, you can get the statistics here, and then look at the values. In this analysis, there is this model number 2 and model number 4 has the lowest chi-square value, and the 2 is better than the 4. So this is the better curve fit for this data. So this is how you can choose and decide on which model to select. And finally, this is the comparison between manual gate and multi-cycle analysis gate. So this plot is provided by David Haviland, who is director for the core facility for Methodist Hospital. And here's see, this is the gate, and this is the manual gate drawn using interval gate, and then the statistics is generated for each peak. This is M1, M2, M3, and these are the statistics for that, the percentage. And then the same data is analyzed using the multi-cycle, and then the statistics is generated here. And then when you compare these two exactly similar data for the percentage of each gating, you see there is significant difference between the manual gates and the multi-cycle gates. And this is how, this is a pretty good looking plot is taken, but there are so many plots which may not be this great looking. When you take that kind of data and start drawing manual gates, and also it would be very subjective. When I see this plot, if I think that, oh, this could be a little bit longer to take till here. So it is very subjective to draw a gate like this, especially when the peaks are pretty close by, and to separate the peaks. So it is better to use the multi-cycle analysis softwares. In any software, you could use the multi-cycle curve fitting analysis than using a manual gate. And this is the last slide, and this is just the example, just to give an example, different type of G1 arrest and G2 arrest if you're working on some kind of drug which would arrest the cycles of the cells. So you could, this is a G1 arrest and this is the G2 arrest, and you see the statistics. And just to show you, for visual, for you to see this pattern of different cell arrests, and this is the example for that one. And that's it. So here I would acknowledge, I like to thank our core facility staff, especially Karan Royer, director of our facility. And special thanks to Karan Ramirez and Sarah Schneider for their help with the valuable feedback when I was working on the slides. And also I like to thank all Flotex committee members for their feedbacks, and also giving an opportunity for me to talk today, and also David Haviland for providing me the slide for that comparison slide. And thank you all for listening. I'll take any questions now.
Thank you, Veena. That was excellent. Very good review of cell cycle, replication, and proliferation by flow cytometry. We did have a few questions in the chat. Some of them were kind of answered as we were going, but perhaps you can either chime in or address them separately. One question was about a specific slide. It says, there are two populations in the G1 area in the second example for BRDU analysis.
Yeah, I know that I did not get any good. That's why I did show that BRDU. I did show a nice looking plot which I got online. I was trying to get a good data which is run in our facility so I can just do the analysis. That is the best data I got to analyze. So other than that, maybe the processing issue or some kind of treatment. I don't know what was going on. That I was just finding a data to show. That is the data I got. But that's why I was showing you the data for a nice looking plot to see how it would look if you prep the sample correctly.
Okay. Here's another question. Would you ever suggest the use of a vital dye like calcium when looking at cell cycle to pull out live cells from the debris? So if you're doing cell cycle analysis on live.
Yeah, cell cycle. Yes, you have to. I mean, there was a plot there to eliminate the doublets. You have to eliminate the doublets even if it is a live cell. There was a slide here. See here.
So I think this question, is asking about the debris and dead cells, possibly.
Oh, debris and dead cells separation.
Yeah, so asking if something like calcium AM that will bind, or rather will stain live cells, if you'd ever use something like that in combination.
No, I have no experience on that. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Okay, and then another question for CFSE analysis, the proliferation, should the x-axis be in linear or log?
That's the linear. It's a DNA analysis, so it's all on linear scale. No, this is a log scale. I'm sorry. Oh, this CFSE is a very bright dye, so the difference is it's exponential, so we use the log scale here than the linear scale.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so we're a little bit over time, so I think that covers most of the questions, and many of them were answered in the chat as well. Thank you again to Veena for an excellent talk, and if you are looking for more education and any of the previous talks that Flotex has hosted, they're recorded, and we have a YouTube channel now. If you go to flotex.org, you'll see all of the educational opportunities, be able to link to the recordings, and also many of the recordings. We've been working with the Memorial Sloan Kettering group, FlowCore as well, and they have a ton of educational information, so we have a link to their channel too. And coming up, Memorial Sloan Kettering and the Francis Crick Institute are doing a session about setting up an experiment in DIVA on May 22nd at 12 Central Time, and you can register for that as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks.